Mr. President, for now, normally we really look at the entire year average, not just on a day-to-day basis.
Yes, yes.
For now, we're still at 58, below 58.
If we average it, but just for our information, what happened yesterday? How did the peso react to the dollar after the victory of Trump,
58.7.
President? How was that? What was the 58.83? Okay. So 58.80. So ganyan po ka importante ang mga world events. Some of our assumptions are affected. What if, ito lang po question, what if the peso further deteriorates against the US dollar?
Sorry, could you repeat that, sir?
What if the peso further deteriorates against the US dollar? What would be our anticipated effect on the 2025 budget, and how should we defend against such an event, Mr. President?
For every peso depreciation, Mr. President, there's an 11.3 billion additional revenue and a disbursement of 3.9 billion and a budget balance of 7.4 billion. Meaning, if the peso depreciates, we collect more revenues with the Bureau of Customs.
Okay, but that's from the point of view of the government revenues, and I understand that since we're talking about the budget, our resource persons will limit themselves to government revenues. But how does it affect our people? Hindi ba the cost of living will also be more expensive?
Of course, with the depreciation of the peso, there is also an effect because we import a lot of goods.
A lot of things, yeah.
And the cost will be a little higher. But, Mr. President, also let's not forget that the buying power also, some of our citizens, countrymen who are dependent on OFW remittances, will be encouraged to spend more also because of the favorable exchange rate on their part. But of course, there's always the pro and the con, and for us, it's a matter of making having all these contingencies in place.
When we compute the GDP, the GDP is composed of 4 basic elements: domestic consumption, government spending, investments, and then net exports. Or do sa fourth category, are we positive with net exports? What is in our GDP equation? Is it a positive or a negative?
We have a trade deficit. That's not surprising. A current account deficit and a balance of payment surplus. In layman's terms, there's still more dollars coming in than going out.
Can we?
That increases our gross national reserves.
And the dollars can come from remittances and, of course, loans. Tama?
Yes, remittances, BPO, tourism, and investments.
Don't we include the proceeds of loans in the balance of payments equation? Yes, that's correct. Okay. What's the answer? Can the chairperson state for the record the answer?
For the record, the sources of income for our dollar reserves, in spite of the increase in the dollar value against the peso, are remittances from the OFWs, the service sector, which is the BPO included, tourism, and investments.
So for a country like the Philippines where net exports is negative, meaning to say, anong tawag doon? Trade deficit, uh, should we desire the depreciation of the peso versus the dollar, or should we desire more the appreciation of the peso versus the dollar?
It depends. Of course, it's a balance of all of the factors that are affecting the economy. Sometimes for exports, it's more appealing for buyers abroad that the peso is weaker than their currency. On the other hand, as we already discussed earlier, with a weaker currency, it's also more expensive for us to be able to procure imports. So that's why, again, we go back to we always try to focus on strengthening investments in our economy.
Is that the thinking of the economic managers? Given the Philippine situation na trade deficit tayo, what is to be desired? A strengthening of the peso against the dollar or a weakening of the peso against the dollar?
We want stability and predictability
Correct.
and more investments. We want to manufacture more to sell to the world
That's correct. Okay.
or service exports.
Yes, thank you kasi andito yata lahat yan sa President's message. That's why I want to go over them one by one if we are really achieving them, Mr. President. Teka muna, we make of record that we have allowed the DBM Secretary to not to be here today, no? Madam
Yeah.
Chairperson,
Oh.
because she was here yesterday, so okay na po yun sa atin.
Although
Because-
she's still represented here.
Yes, the
with
DBM is here with, who's representing the DBM?
Undersecretary Janet Abuel.
Yes.
Yes, who came highly recommended by the DBM Secretary.
Yes. And then the BSP governor is also not with us today, and he was also not with us yesterday. But I think it's because of a previously scheduled trip abroad. Is he
Yes.
abroad? Is he abroad?
Yes,
Okay.
Mr. President.
I remember the time when Senator Recto was still with us. He was able to extract from the budget the total expenses for telecommunications. I think I still remember parang a press release from Senator Recto about the telecommunication expenses of the government. Do we know the expenses? I will not be asking about that. Ang question ko is, do we know the expense of the government for foreign trips?
For foreign trips,
Yes,
yes. Let
Kasi, Mr. President, yung ating schedule na bulabog sa mga foreign trips ng ating mga heads of agencies, sabi ko ba, sobrang daming foreign trips.
Actually, for the record, Mr. President, I understand that we have to keep our foreign relations robust, but I would have wanted, and I'm sure our colleagues share this concern, that when they know it's the budget season, that they prioritize the discussions here. They know it comes more or less, we release the calendar early on.